Welcome to the Golden State Media Concepts, America's Still Beautiful podcast, a weekly news podcast covering all the top positive and uplifting news stories. Are you tired of the same old news? Are you sick of the seemingly endless political spin and negativity? We cover stories that will inspire, uplift, and remind you of the good in the world. Tune into the Golden State Media Concepts, America's Still Beautiful podcast to get all the great and positive news stories of today.
Thank you for tuning in to the GSMC America Still Beautiful podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Emily Ferrier, here to bring you some uplifting stories in these trying times. For our first story, new research has shown that saffron can enhance the quality of sleep in adults who've been experiencing poor sleep. The research was conducted at Australia's Murdoch University and published in the Journal of Clinical Sleep Medicine last week. Lead researcher, Dr. Adrian Lepresti, whose earlier research found saffron to be an effective natural agent for the treatment of mid to moderate depression, said one of the features of that research showed improvements in sleep. This research used volunteers who were not being treated for depression, were physically healthy, and had been medication-free for at least 4 weeks, apart from the contraceptive pill, and had self-reported symptoms of poor sleep. This is a serious issue, as poor sleep quality can have a negative impact on both mental and physical health and can interfere with daily function. Our previous research showed saffron was an effective add-on to pharmaceutical antidepressants in patients experiencing mild to moderate depression, because many of these reported improvements in their sleep. In this study, we focused on healthy adults who were generally medication-free but had experienced poor sleep lasting greater than 4 weeks. Dr. Lepresti said, the results from Murdoch University indicate a standardized saffron extract, a dose of 14 milligrams twice daily for 28 days, improved sleep quality in adults with self-reported poor sleep, with these changes occurring in the first 7 days of treatment. In addition to the improved sleep, the study showed that saffron was well tolerated with no reported adverse effects. However, the researchers reported that even though the results were positive, the findings require replication using a larger sample size and deferring populations. Our early research is indeed positive, and there's evidence that taking standardized saffron extract is associated with improvements in sleep quality. However, to verify these findings, further studies using larger samples, treatment periods, and volunteers with varying characteristics is required. If you can't figure out why you're so desperately craving junk food late at night, another piece of new research for sleep says it might be because you're not getting enough sleep. Based on studies from Cologne University in Germany, tiredness boosts both production of brain cells and hunger hormones that are linked to comfort eating and hunger, respectively. Additionally, researchers say that participants who went an entire night with no sleep were willing to fork out more cash for snacks like chocolates and biscuits compared to non-food items. On the other hand, they would not spend the same excessive amounts of money after getting a proper night's rest. It explains why we're more likely to reach for the biscuit tin than a piece of fruit late at night. Britain is amongst the most overweight and sleep-deprived nations in the world, and evidence shows that the two are linked. Psychologist Julia Rhyme says, "We found a full night of sleep deprivation compared with a full night of habitual sleep increased the subjective values of snack food rewards compared with non-food rewards." Using an MRI, her team showed losing sleep fired up neurons in the hypothalamus. The area of gray matter has been linked to reward-seeking behavior, such as eating under stress. And the hypothalamus, of course, controls appetite. The data suggests that one-way lack of sleep can promote overeating and obesity risk. This behavioral result was paralleled by increased activity selectively after sleep deprivation. Blood tests also showed an increase in the levels of ghrelin, the hormone that tells us to eat. The study published in J Neurosci was based on 32 healthy 19 to 33-year-old men of normal weight who were kept awake and allowed to sleep normally. Each experiment followed an evening meal of yogurt, pasta, meat, and creamy mushroom sauce on 2 separate nights. At each visit, they were instructed either to return home and get a normal night's sleep while wearing a watch that monitors activity, or spend the night at the lab where they were kept awake. This allowed a team to compare their desire for snack foods, along with their brain activity and hormone levels during each morning after the experiments. The next day, they were given 3 pounds to spend on snacks, such as popular brands of German chocolate bars or chips, and everyday household items, or university merchandise. In an online auction, images of goods flashed up on a screen with pricings giving them in increments of 25 pence. Only after sleep deprivation were the participants willing to pay extra money for the junk food items, which they then were allowed to eat afterwards. Sleep loss is associated with increased obesity risk, as demonstrated by the correlations between sleep duration and change in body mass index or body fat percentage. We found ghrelin concentrations were increased after sleep deprivation compared with habitual sleep. Despite similar hunger ratings due to fasting, participants were willing to spend more money on food items only after sleep deprivation. The MRI data paralleled this behavioral finding, revealing how food rewards specific regulation of the hypothalamic valuation signals after a single night's sleep deprivation. She said the findings should shed light on the link between sleep deprivation and obesity. One problem in modern society is that sleep restriction building up constantly over a week rather than a total sleep deprivation. However, in our approach, we used a total night's sleep as a first step in unraveling mechanisms underlying sleep loss associated with increased food valuation. Together, our findings reveal that the mechanism through which sleep deprivation might promote food intake cues to gain access to processing hypothalamic circuits via the amygdala. A similar study conducted by Swedish researchers last year found their participants went to purchase food that was higher in calories and weighed almost a fifth more than their normal intake after one night's sleep, which implies that grocery shopping, while tired, could also have a knock-on effect for overall well-being. So if you're anxious about your junk food intake, try hitting the hay a little earlier and see if it affects your dietary choices. Get some sleep, America. It's pretty important. So when we return from the break, we're going to be talking about some really incredible teenagers that are doing so much to help Americans and help America be a better place. So in the meantime, if you're listening to this to keep yourselves up, go ahead, turn it off, go to sleep, and we'll talk to you in the morning. It's more important for you to get your rest right now, I think, as we all heard. And if you're just waking up, then good morning, and we'll talk to you right after the break.
The GSMC Life and Happiness podcast takes you on a journey of exploration. We'll discuss tried and true methods alongside the latest trends of how to best live your life to its fullest and happiest. From psychology to meditation, science to self-help books, the GSMC Life and Happiness podcast will help you to discover what makes you happy and how you can live life being the best you possible. Download the GSMC Life and Happiness podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Welcome back. Before the break, we were talking about the general effects of sleep deprivation and how saffron might be able to alleviate that. And now, a 13-year-old philanthropist from Newark, New Jersey, has been working tirelessly to help shelter animals across the country get adopted by making them handcrafted bow ties. Darius Brown's sister first taught him how to sew so that he could improve his motor skills as a youngster. And he became more and more talented with his needlework. And she suggested he use his newfound skill to start sewing bow ties. Shortly after, Darius started creating the spiffy little accessories. Hurricanes Harvey and Irma hit Texas and Florida. And the teen was heartbroken by the amount of animals who were left without homes after the storms. He then resolved to help shelter pets find their forever families by making them personalized bow ties. He figured that if cats and dogs could look extra dapper for the potential new adopters, they would be more likely to find a home. And he was right. Since Darius began his labor of love, he guesses he's made about 500 bow ties. And not only that, he says that the accessories may have helped more than 100 dogs and cats find their forever homes. As more and more animal shelters reached out to Darius about getting their own shipment of ties, he launched a GoFundMe campaign in June of 2019 in order to raise more money for fabric and supplies. Since then, his crowdfunding page has raised more than $50,000 and earned him the GoFundMe Hero title for January of 2020. If you want to check out more of his work, just visit his Facebook, his Instagram, or his website. That's for Darius Brown, the bow tie maker. In other incredible teen news, if you've ever struggled to see vehicles approaching the blind spots in your car, this young brainiac has come up with the most ingenious solution. And she's not even old enough to get her driver's license. 14-year-old Elena Gassler designed a system that eliminates the blind spot by installing a webcam into the interior of the car so that it records a live feed of the objects on the other side. She then installed a small light projector inside of the car, so the webcam's feed would be projected onto the part of your car that blocks the needed view. Once the system is online, the parts of the car structure that prevent the driver from fully seeing their surroundings are rendered seemingly invisible by the projector. Elena first got the idea for the system after she witnessed her mother struggling to see beyond these blind spots in her own car, and she now hopes that her invention will prevent traffic collisions in the future. There are so many car accidents and injuries and deaths that could have been prevented by a pillar not being there, said Elena. And since we can't take it out of our cars, I decided to get rid of it without getting rid of it. Earlier this week, the teenager from West Grove, Pennsylvania, won the $25,000 Simuli Foundation Prize, which is the top award in the Broadcom Masters Science and Engineering competition for middle school students. So congratulations to Elena, whose project has the potential to decrease the amount of automobile incidents by reducing blind spots, said Maya Ajmira, President and CEO of the Society for Science and the public publisher of Science News. With so many challenges in our world, Elena and her fellow Broadcom Masters finalists make me optimistic, she said. I gotta say that these young students are making me pretty optimistic for the future as well. Here's another one. Some students have invented a door handle for public bathrooms that can clean and sanitize itself. If you ask me, it's a pretty important thing to have right now. So now you can grab that public bathroom door handle without fear. This solution to the conundrum of how to gracefully exit after washing your hands is finally here. 2 student inventors are among the 20 finalists for the International James Dyson Award for their illuminating solution to bacteria-ridden door handles. Despite the use of sanitizers and routine cleaning of public areas, the bathroom door handle presents a unique challenge. University of Hong Kong graduates Sum Ming Wang and King Pong Lee set out to design a solution that was self-powered and avoided the chemical cleansers that are sometimes harmful to human health. Nowadays, people use chemical cleaning materials to clean up public areas. But it is both easy to wipe off and harmful to the human body. Our design has the durability and it's effective. By using materials that cost only $13 per door handle, they combine titanium dioxide power, and ultraviolet LED lights effectively to develop a door handle that cleans itself. Not only that, they also engineered a small gearbox and generator to be hooked up to the door itself, making it self-powered. The kinetic energy generated from opening and closing the door provides enough electricity to keep the handle lit and functional. The handle kills bacteria by the action of the thin titanium dioxide film on the outside of the clear handle. The chemical is known to be a photocatalyst, so when the UV lights activate in the coating, it reacts to water and oxygen to create a hydroxyl radicals that decompose the bacteria, and it kills 99.8% of bacteria, at least in lab tests. So that is a pretty incredible thing to be happening, and it's so incredible that all of these things were made by young teens, that they're making such a difference in the world. And when we come back, there's going to be a couple more incredible things that teens have been doing. All of these stories kind of make you feel better about the future of our world being left in these young hands. At least they do for me. So we'll hear about him when we come back from the break. So stay tuned for that.
This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Welcome back. When we left off, we were talking about some pretty brilliant young inventors and entrepreneurs. And now, an 8th grade student managed to convince a team of legislators to participate in a day-long lesson, which they will remember for the rest of their lives. 14-year-old Alex Johnson has been using a wheelchair since he was in 2nd grade due to a form of skeletal dysplasia, a condition which affects the growth of his bones and cartilage. Since the teen from Lebanon, Tennessee, has been using a wheelchair for most of his life and has been issuing a simple challenge to his peers and classmates, spend a day in a wheelchair so that they can understand what it's like to be disabled. Not only has the youngster gotten dozens of students to participate in his Spend a Day in My Wheels challenge, he recently got 10 state lawmakers from across the aisle to participate in the challenge as well. With Alex's help, Tennessee Rep. Clark Boyd, our Lebanon hosted with the bipartisan event last month. And the challenge was definitely eye-opening. An eye-opening experience, of course, for the legislators. Even in a building that's handicap accessible, still, you bump into doors, Boyd told WSMV. You bump into walls. Some doors become very heavy for someone with a wheelchair. Opening a refrigerator door seems to be a pretty big challenge. Alex now hopes that with the experience, the lawmakers will understand the difficulties of the disabled community so that they can pass more handicap-friendly legislations. Our whole community is very supportive of Alex and proud of the effort that he's made to create a better understanding about what it's like to live with a disability. Boyd added in his statement, he's an amazing young man who's found a way to use his disability as an ability to educate others. Rather than spending his hard-earned cash on game systems or goodies, this other teenager has been saving up money for the last 2 years so that he could buy his friend a new electric wheelchair. Tanner Wilson and Brandon Quayles have been friends for years. Though both of them go to Caddo High School in Norman, Arkansas, Brandon has a harder time getting through the hallways. Since Brandon uses a push wheelchair to get from class to class, he says his arms start to hurt after using it for extended periods of time. Little did he know that Tanner has spent the last 2 years secretly stashing away all of his paychecks from his part-time job at a local car repair shop to buy Brandon an electric wheelchair model. Tanner finally managed to buy the wheelchair last month, and when he used it to surprise Brendan in class last month, the stunned teenager said he could barely contain his emotions. They came in, and my face just blew up. I was just crying everywhere. I was like, wow, I can't believe they did that for me. It's been my dream to just have one of these, Brendan added. And my dream has come true. Tanner's mother, Colleen Carmack, says the boys have been happy to read all the messages of praise that they've received on social media views since their story was shared by national news outlet. Especially Tanner. Tanner's had some bad experiences over the last year. So him being able to help somebody else has really brought him out. Being able to know that he made a difference. And I can see a difference in him. Like wanting to get out and do more. We're talking about college. He's at that goal, but we're talking about it more now. So it's pretty incredible that these teens have been doing so much for the disabled community and for their friends. And some more incredible feats in the disabled community. A national park in Michigan has become the first to implement heavy-duty wheelchairs as a means for allowing disabled viewers to enjoy the trails as well. This track chair is a wheelchair that's been equipped with treads to navigate steep hills and sandy trails of Sandy Beard Dunes National Lakeshore. To track their chair program, the Track Chair program was launched in May and created by Friends of Sleeping Bear Dunes, an organization that specializes in making the park more accessible to visitors. Here at Sleeping Bear Dunes, about half the park is a designated wilderness, so in those areas, we can do a lot more maintenance or changes. So the better option is to have a vehicle that can take the person into these areas so they can experience the trail without having to make major modifications. This track chair can currently only be rented out for the use of the 1.5 mile long Bayview Trail. However, the organization says that the track chair has already been utilized by dozens of visitors. The track chair is free for visitors so long as they reserve it several days in advance. And Friends of Sleeping Bear soon hope to purchase an additional track chair for young visitors to use hopefully by the end of the summer. They also hope that other national parks will implement a similar program so that everyone can enjoy the beauty of nature regardless of their physical abilities. I agree. I hope that this will change other parks' views on this as well and show how important it is to ensure everybody gets to have the same experience. So good things are starting to happen there, and I am personally pretty inspired by these young people showing us the best about society, using our money to help our friends, or showing legislators what it's like to live in a world if you're differently abled, so that if they understand, they can make the important changes to make people's lives better. Because that is where change starts. When we come back, an 8-year-old girl who wanted to attend a daddy-daughter dance was helped out by an unlikely person. So we're going to talk about that story and a couple others when we return from our break. So don't go anywhere, and I'll talk to you after these messages.
Want to find out what movies to go see? Then check out the GSMC Movie Podcast. It's your ticket to the latest movies, whether it's a new blockbuster event, romantic, comedy, or action flick. This show has got it all covered. They talk some what to go see now. Don't bother. What's hot on Netflix and everything in between. That's GSMCpodcast.com/movie-podcast. When it's all about the movies, it has to be this new show. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back. Before the break, we were talking about some incredible things happening for the differently abled. And now that we're back, a wish came true for this 8-year-old girl who wanted to attend the school's daddy-daughter dance because a compassionate security guard had stepped in. Avi Cox, now a second grader, has always been eager to attend the annual daddy-daughter dance with her friends at the Arkansas school. But after her father passed away over the holidays, the heartbroken youngster assumed she would not be able to go to the February soiree. When Van Buren School Resource Officer Nick Harvey heard that Avery didn't have an escort to the dance, however, he sought permission to be her date. I reached out to her mother because the last thing I wanted was to get rejected by a second grader. And the next day, I formally asked if she'd be my date to the daddy-daughter dance. Needless to say, Avi was thrilled to accept the invitation. And the dynamic duo even made sure to coordinate their outfits. After Harvey and Avi took the pictures, they rode in a limo to the school and danced the night away with other elementary school kids and teachers. It was an event the youngster will not soon forget. Not only that, Harvey says that he hopes to be Avi's escort for all the school dances to come, so she never has to miss another dance. In other lovely officer news, a Washington, D.C. police officer is being praised for going above and beyond the call of duty in order to soothe a boy with autism who was in the middle of a meltdown. The incident took place back in July when Taylor Pamela and her 4-year-old son Andrew boarded the metro and prepared to head home. She just picked him up from school and she'd been anticipating a quiet 45-minute ride home. But for one reason or another, that was not the case. For those of you who don't know, when you have a child with autism, your child will have some good days and they'll have some very bad ones. Today was one of the bad ones, Pamela wrote on Facebook. Andrew's biggest behavior problem that he's been working on by learning calming strategies is sometimes when he gets upset, he'll go 2 steps too far and escalate into a full mental breakdown. During this particular journey, Andrew refused to sit in his seat. When his mother tried to calm him down, he began to throw a tantrum. He started to roll on the floor, screaming and his shoe fell off, and he flung it across the train. All while I'm on the floor, trying to calm him down, in a dress with all the candy I had. Then he starts kicking, hitting, pulling my hair while everyone in rush hour stares on the train, mostly thinking that I was a bad parent who had an out-of-control child, even though, really, he can't help it. After 20 minutes of unsuccessfully trying to calm her son, the overwhelmed mom exited the subway before their stop, tried to calm Andrew down from a different station. Unfortunately, he continued to roll on the floor in a meltdown for more than 15 minutes. That's when DC Metro Officer Dominic Case appeared on the scene with a helping hand. I wonder if Dominic Case decided to be a Metro officer for DC because of his initials. Upon asking where Pamela was headed, Case volunteered to ride with her and her son to help keep him calm. He then soothed the youngster by showing off his police gadgets and holding his hand as they moved about the subway system. After they boarded the train, he sat with the little family for the remainder of their 20-minute journey. He watched videos with Andrew, took pictures with him, even gave the youngster his badge at the end of the trip. He honestly restored my faith that there are good people still left in the world, Pamela later wrote on Facebook. After her Facebook post went viral, she was able to reunite Officer Case with her son, and the two have since become best friends. And that's not the only act of kindness for somebody with autism. A little boy's simple gesture of kindness towards his classmate is having a big impact on social media users. 8-year-old Christian Moore was headed into his first day of classes at Mene Elementary in Wichita, Kansas, when he saw another boy curled up in a ball, crying by the outside corner of a school. Without hesitation, Christian approached the youngster and consoled him until it was time to go inside. He then took the hand of his new friend and walked him inside the school. Little did Christian know, the distressed youngster, 8-year-old Connor Kreitz, had been overwhelmed by his first day of school because he has autism. Christian's mother, Courtney Moore, was so moved by her son's act of kindness towards his classmate, she snapped a picture of the two young students holding hands and posted it to social media. I saw him on the ground with Connor as Connor was crying in the corner, and he was consoling him. He grabbed his hand and walked him to the front door, and we waited until the bell rang, and then walked him inside of the school. The rest is history. They've an inseparable bond. The photos have since been shared thousands of times, and the two boys enjoy their newfound friendship. Their mothers hope that it will inspire people to be kind to others. One act of kindness can change someone's life, can change the world, Courtney said proudly. That's all it takes. This picture is absolutely heartwarming, and so are all of these stories. Just because someone is different than you doesn't mean you should be keeping them at an arm's length. You should be welcoming the differences, holding their hand, and helping everyone where you can. And these young boys helping each other out was just the most sweet and lovely thing that I've seen in a while. When we come back, two men have created something very incredible that could help save a lot of animals from potentially becoming fashion. So we'll talk about that when we get back from our break. So definitely don't go anywhere, because this could really change the face of fashion for animal activists. So stay tuned for that when we return from our break.
pets bring such joy to our lives, and the GSMC Pets podcast is here to share in that joy. We'll tell stories of pets finding their forever homes, acting in unexpected ways, being helpful, or just being silly. Whether you love dogs, cats, llamas, reptiles, fish, or you've never met an animal you didn't like, the GSMC Pets podcast is for you.
Welcome back. Before the break, we were talking about the kindness of people who saw people in a tough situation and how they altered their behavior and they did everything they could to make these people feel better and make them feel like they had someone to lean on. And now, 2 men have succeeded in developing an alternative animal leather made out of a Mexican cactus so that they could save millions of animals worldwide. Adrian Lopez and Marty Carrez are responsible for creating their vegan fabric out of the noble cactus, although it took them 2 years of research and development to design the fabric. They perfected its manufacturing process in July, and they debuted it to the fashion world in Milan back in October. The entrepreneurs realized that the environmental impact of animal leather, after they both spent years working in the furniture, automotive, and fashion industries, upon quitting their jobs, they co-founded Adriano De Marti to design their innovative leather replacement. Their patented Deserto fabric is made of cactus leaves that are harvested sustainably every 6 to 8 months. The material is designed to breathe easily while still being durable and partially biodegradable. In addition to the cactus-based material also requiring minimal amounts of water to develop, it is grown organically in the state of Zacatecas. The material, which has been made available in a variety of colors, uses natural dyes and has also been used to make everything from bags and automotive seating to shoes and jackets. On a visit to the LL Bean flagship store in Freeport, Maine, 7-year-old Benjamin Ball asked if the store's cafe had a paper straw machine for his lemonade. When he discovered that he could only get a plastic straw, his love of sea turtles and ocean life prompted him to take action. So, after he returned to his home in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, Benjamin wrote a letter to the president and CEO of LL Bean, Steve Smith. I'm writing to you because I'm a friend to the sea turtles. And I want to protect them, said Benjamin. Marine animals get killed by plastic in the ocean. And sea turtles are important to the ecosystem and to me. Benjamin had one request. Could you use paper straws instead of plastic straws, please? Within 24 short hours, Benjamin received a response from Smith, who assured Benjamin he'd look into the issue. It made me smile, said Smith. It was really articulate, well-reasoned, polite, yet passionate, and emotional note about saving a species that no one's really speaking for. It hit me in a really emotional way. Since receiving Benjamin's letter, LL Bean has announced to its retail affiliates and employee cafeterias converting to 100% biodegradable straws. The retailer is the latest to join a growing anti-straw movement that includes Disney, Ben & Jerry's, Starbucks, Major League Baseball, and McDonald's. This letter hit at the absolutely perfect time with a fantastic idea. Smith personally thanked Benjamin during a recent visit to Smith's alma mater, Dickinson College, which is in Benjamin's hometown of Carlisle, Pennsylvania. Now, if you don't know too much about the plastic straw issue, at the beginning of July 2018, Seattle was the first U.S. city to ban plastic straws, but they're not alone. Starbucks plans to phase out plastic straws completely by 2020, and McDonald's recently announced that it'll ban plastic straws as well. So why are they all doing this? In 2017, Americans used about 390 million plastic straws every day. And it takes up to 200 years for the plastic straw to decompose, and they cannot be recycled. And plastic straws are the 11th most found ocean trash. Each year, 1 million seabirds and 100,000 marine animals die from ingesting plastic. The environmental impact of straws, since they can't be recycled, it's not acceptable by most curbside recycling programs. They end up in landfills or polluting the oceans. Plastics do not biodegrade and never fully degrade. Straws are littered very often and end up in the ocean life, caught in nostrils of turtles, and ends up causing them to die. Straws break down into microplastics, which are very dangerous for sea life. So it's pretty incredible that this young boy was doing so much to save the world, really. So I'm inspired by him, and I hope that you were as well. When we come back from our break, we're going to talk about the good news in history on today's date. So don't go anywhere, because good news happened in history too. It's not just today. So stay tuned.
The GSMC Life and Happiness Podcast takes you on a journey of exploration. We'll discuss tried and true methods alongside the latest trends of how to best live your life to its fullest and happiest. From psychology to meditation, science to self-help books, the GSMC Life and Happiness Podcast will help you to discover what makes you happy and how you can live life being the best you possible. Download the GSMC Life and Happiness Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Welcome back. When we left off before the break, we were talking about the environmental impact of plastic straws and leather, what they're doing for the environment and for animal life across the world, and how some young Americans were making a huge difference in these industries to make them more sustainable and save our planet one straw at a time. And now, the good news in history for March 5th. Today's date, the day of recording. So it might be March 6th when you get this. So the good news in today's date, starting with 50 years ago today, the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty went into effect after ratification by 43 nations agreeing to prevent the spread of nuclear weapons. The goal was also to promote cooperation in the peaceful uses of nuclear energy and to advance disarmament in general. It took 3 years for the treaty to be negotiated by a United Nations sponsored committee made up of 18 countries. Those countries being Canada, France, Great Britain, Italy, the US, Bulgaria, Czechoslovakia, Poland, Romania, the Soviet Union, Brazil, Burma, Ethiopia, India, Mexico, Nigeria, Sweden, and the United Arab Republic. As of 2016, 191 countries have joined the treaty, with more nations embracing this treaty than any other arms limitation or disarmament agreement. A testament to the document's significance, but with a few exceptions. North Korea withdrew in 2003, and Iran has been in non-compliance with safeguards in the past 2 decades. 4 UN states have never accepted the treaty, 3 of which possess nuclear weapons: India, Israel, and Pakistan. South Sudan, founded in 2011, has never joined. From the beginning, the treaty delineated 5 countries, which already had nuclear explosives before January in 1967, as nuclear weapon states: the United States, United Kingdom, France, Russia, and China. So there's still hope that the rest of the countries are going to join, but either way, I think it's pretty incredible that 191 countries are a part of this treaty. For some more good news on today's date in 1924, nearly 100 years ago, Frank Corona of Buffalo, New York, became the first to bowl 2 successive perfect 300 games in league play, and his 4-game total of 1,115 became a record that stood for 50 years. On today's date in 1955, Elvis Presley appeared on television for the very first time. The U.S. Supreme Court upheld the right of blacks to attend any state schools, colleges, and universities in 1956 on today's date. A revival of the Voltaire classic, Candide, opened on Broadway with lyrics by Stephen Sondheim and Louis J. Stadlin, stealing the show with his impish portrayal of Voltaire, Pangloss, the theater in the round production that lasted for 740 shows. That was in 1974 on today's date. North and South Korea met for the first time in 25 years for peace talks in 1997 on today's date. The nature documentary Planet Earth, narrated by David Attenborough, premiered on the BBC in 2006 on today's date, and is still probably the most well-known nature documentary of all time. 3 6 Mafia became the first hip-hop artist to win an Academy Award for Best Song and to perform at the Oscars in 2006. Although I suppose they're not, well, I guess it's not hip-hop. Never mind. And on this day in 2012, an impressive scene of humanity played out on a beach in Brazil when 30 dolphins mysteriously stranded themselves on a shore one morning and were all saved by locals who worked tirelessly to drag them back into the sea. Some pretty incredible stuff. And on this day in 1960, Cuban photographer Alberto Corda shot the most famous picture in the world. Fidel Castro's official photographer, Corda, captured the moment at the memorial service for victims of an explosion in Havana. The image of revolutionary Che Guevara, at 31 years old, was captured with a 90mm lens, 2 frames before the leader exited the scene. As a lifelong communist and supporter of the Cuban Revolution, Corda claimed no payment for the picture, never asked for the royalties. The Maryland Institute College of Art called the picture a symbol for the 20th century and the world's most famous photo, the one that was reproduced probably more than any other image in photography. So, I think that brings us to the end of today's history, of today's date. I think it's always important to reflect on the good news from history or fascinating news from today's history in the past to remind ourselves that these things stick with us. And they will continue to be our legacy long after we're gone. So it's important to remember where we came from so that we can look together for the future. So that's it for me today. So thank you for listening to the GSMC America Still Beautiful podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I would like to ask that you all please remember to subscribe to the show. And if you could write us a nice review and rate the episode, that would really help us out. It really helps us move through the ranks. Also, if you can please follow us on our social medias. So that's Facebook, it's Twitter, and of course Instagram. That would also really help us get the podcast out there. So thank you for listening. Thank you for supporting, and go get a good night's sleep tonight. Okay? I'll talk to you soon. Good night.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts, America's Still Beautiful podcast, part of the GSMC Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcasts on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type in GSMC to find all of our shows from the GSMC Podcast Network, from social media news to marketing news and even weird news. The GSMC Podcast Network has you covered. You can also follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's episode of the Golden State Media Concepts, America's Still Beautiful podcast.